So now, with that in mind, let's think about the state of beta cells in type 1 diabetes.
So what happens in type 1 diabetes? There are multiple theories, right? I'm partial to a couple. I'm going to focus kind of on the multifactorial look at diabetes as opposed to like the singular, it's autoimmune or, it's genetic, whatever. My take is that type 1 diabetes results from a combination of several factors: genetic origins, environmental origins, immune factors, nutritional factors. They all play a part in that stress that is reaching the beta cells. And it's not just autoimmunity. There are pathogenic infections, the nutritional imbalances and deficits, and perhaps physiological deficits in the beta cells themselves that are contributing to the onset of the disease itself. And you've got this cool little Venn diagram here of, it's once you see all the factors that play into the development of diabetes, you're impressed because it's more than what you thought it was. But then you see how each of those factors play into each of the other factors. And there's just so many webs of complexity to this. And it's just, it can be overwhelming, but when you're coming at it from a research aspect, it's kind of fascinating to see all of the different pieces at play. Let's take another look, right? So these here are the main three that I mentioned, right? You've got this genetic predisposition. What are the genes at play that are, contributing to the ease of development of the disease? Environmental triggers. Could be nutrition, could be pathogens, you name it. Immune dysfunction, right? Something about our immune system isn't cleaning up the mess like it's supposed to. Why not? When you combine the genetic influence with the immune dysfunction, right? What about our genes is not clicking the right switches for immune function? Right? There's interplay between those two, obviously. The genes are influencing our ability to handle and regulate the immune system. You look the other way, genes and environmental triggers. Genes aren't clicking the right switches for, let's say, nutrient absorption, right? Maybe the genes in our guts are not properly turned on to properly absorb fat-soluble vitamins or iron or copper. Anything in your food can be influenced genetically. It also works the other way around, and I should make that point here. No arrow in this flow chart is one directional. It flows both ways, right? So environmentally, and we think about how it influences our genetic predisposition, what nutrients are we giving our body to supply proper DNA handling? Right? When you look at DNA, when you look at gene manipulation, DNA repair mechanisms, all of them require vitamins and minerals to properly operate. And in states of imbalance or deficiency, why wouldn't that impact the mechanisms in the cell and how they operate and how they turn genes on or off? So it does go both ways. So let's talk about the immune system a little bit. What are the ways in which our immune system is suspect in all of this? They talk about molecular mimicry, right? Mistaken identity. This could be T cells, which are a function of they're a type of cell in our immune system that helps attack invaders. Have our beta cells been incorrectly labeled as enemies? Why? That's kind of the prevailing theory, without anyone actually investigating the beta cell, right? We're all so ready to villainize the immune system and wonder why beta cells are being attacked by the immune system, but we're not actually asking why the beta cell looks the way it looks, and maybe it's kind of like not healthy, and that's why the immune system. But that's talk for another time. The cytokine storm that results from this. So cytokines are like inflammatory markers that let our immune system know where and when to attack. So inflammatory cytokines amplify immune responses, worsening beta cell destruction. So this is kind of feeds into the domino effect. Once one beta cell is targeted, it spills its contents into the open. Once the immune system senses that a cell has kind of spilled, it's kind of like, hang on a sec, we got, clean up on aisle 4. It heads in, it marks everything that has spilled into the open with cytokines so that our immune system knows what needs to be cleaned up. This cytokine release and mark for cleanup initiates even more levels of immunity that come in, and it can be overwhelming, especially for those beta cells that are on the edge of handling the existing ROS within them. And then obviously the genetic predisposition. They might just not have the right genes, right? The HLA genes, or the human leukocyte antigen genes. So this has to do with our body's ability to identify friend from foe. It helps our body not attack itself and identify things foreign to our body. Discrepancies in that HLA block of genes, which is shown here, are tied not just to type 1 diabetes, but to almost all autoimmune diseases. I think over 50% of them. So things like lupus, things like rheumatoid arthritis, they all have issues with that HLA gene class. Then we think of environmentally viruses and bacteria as triggers, right? A lot of people on social media talk about parasites, or, hey, I got COVID and then I had diabetes. So there's a viral aspect to it as well. Coxsackie virus, which is the virus behind hand, foot, and mouth disease in children, has been shown to directly impact beta cells and initiate an immune response that ends up leading to diabetes. Epstein-Barr is one of them. Rubella is one of them. Cytomegalovirus. Any kind of pathogenic activity in the body is going to be focused on obtaining glucose from its host, right? Glucose is like a source of life for anything. So when viruses invade, they're interested in getting sugar. How do you get sugar from a host? You make sure that their blood sugars are high. And so that makes sense when you go to attack the beta cell. And it also influences our gut microbiome, the bacteria present. So imbalances in our gut bacteria, gut dysbiosis, all the things behind Crohn's, IBD, their leaky gut syndrome, they're all increasing systemic inflammation because of their inability to properly clear out harmful pathogens, and leads to improper absorption of nutrients that are going to help the immune system work properly. So iron, I'm partial to iron as a particular culprit in this, because the same way that pathogens and viruses focus on sugar, they also focus on iron, because sugar, in order to use sugar, you need iron. So there is equal importance in terms of any sort of pathogen in the body between sugar and iron. So that's something that they both focus on. And they found that in people in states of diabetes and in these states of viruses and bacterial infections, iron metabolism is thrown way off, and it's in a direction that directly impacts beta cell health. And then obviously the role of diet and our environment, right? We've got this grocery store shelf of absolute trash. If any of this is in your house, get it out of there, right? So there are theories on early exposure to dairy, cow's milk protein, gluten. There's a lot of huge co-occurrence of celiac disease and type 1 diabetes, high glycemic diets. So High glycemic foods are foods that enter our digestive system and let go of a lot of sugar very quickly, right? And this is kind of fighting the effects of amylin, which is slowing it down and making sure insulin doesn't get overrun. Those high glycemic foods are challenging insulin's ability to properly regulate our blood sugars. And with these dietary triggers, I don't think about them often from a, well, it's, cow, dairy proteins look similar to insulin, and that's why people with diabetes don't make enough insulin. I think it has much more to do with the nutritional value of the foods. Pasteurized, ultra and pasteurized dairy loses a lot of its mineral content, a lot of its beneficial bacterial content. I think that has more of a direct impact on beta cell health than the molecular mimicry aspect of it. And then environmental toxins, chemicals like nitrosamines, heavy metals, glyphosate is another huge culprit in liver health impacting iron metabolism impacting beta cell health. So there's just a huge cascade that can result from dietary and environmental sources. Another question to ask ourselves, I alluded to it before, but in the autoimmune theory, we tend to like to only talk about the immune system, right? There's something wrong with the beta cell, or no, there's something wrong with our immune system. It just acts on our beta cells completely out of the blue, right? Unprompted, unsolicited, just jumps on the beta cells. Well, we're starting to come to terms with the fact that there might be something wrong with the beta cells, right? Might be something internal. It might be something on the cell surface. Genetic mutations within the cell itself might predispose beta cells to early dysfunction, right? They may not be aging properly or maturing properly, which could be a sign for early death. Self-stress signals. So with protein folding, the endoplasmic reticulum and the beta cell's ability to handle the oxidative stress, make sure that it can create enough insulin and handle the oxidative stress that results from creating that insulin. So this is a wonderful article talking about all of the facets of beta cell health themselves that makes it a likely target of not a rogue immune system, but of a healthy immune system. So it might not actually be an immune issue. It might be a beta cell issue. And this is one of the papers I learned early on in my journey into reading all of this. And it opened up a window of so many opportunities for me. So, like we mentioned, it's a multifactorial disease involving many different things. It's I don't think it's any use to try and find the one right now. I think there's just so many different whack-a-mole holes that we can kind of focus on instead of just trying to hit the one mole. Lots of different ways, from a pathogenic standpoint, a nutrition standpoint, as well as antioxidant and immune standpoint. My personal focus, I talked a lot about iron, rebalancing my iron metabolism, my liver health, clearing out gallstones, clearing out my gut, a lot of beneficial fiber, a lot of beneficial prebiotics, probiotics, fighting parasites, and focusing on whole foods and a nutrient-dense diet.
So when you consider all of the possibilities that are feeding into this loop of beta cell destruction, it can be a little bit overwhelming because, right, it used to be one thing. I only had to worry about my genes, and if you had gene therapy, then everything would be okay. And if I just didn't have enough beta cells, if I grew more beta cells, then everything would be fine. But when you realize the multifactorial aspect of the development of diabetes, you have to now start to pay attention to how each of these processes interloop, right? And it can become more complex, but when you realize that a lot of the ways in which you address those feedback loops overlaps with all of the other things feeding into diabetes, it simplifies things.